Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit, and today's subject is going to be habits. And you see here I've got just 3 colors. So I've got a habit of using a full spectrum of colors on my palette, and this is more of it's not really a Rembrandt palette because he used more earth colors. I think I talked about that in a previous episode of difference between modern colors and your ambers and more earthy colors that actually come directly from the earth that aren't created in a lab, which the modern colors are. They have a little more translucency to them, more vibrant. But that's what I have in the way of paint. So I'm going to go with yellows, reds, blacks, and whites and get rid of my blue, which means I'm also getting rid of green and purple because that has the blue in it. You know, green mixes with yellow, or blue mixes with yellow to give you green, and then blue mixes with red to give you a purple. So anyway, I'm going to change things up a little bit and talk about habit. And I was actually going to do this from a landscape and really challenge myself, but I didn't have time to pull up an image before it became time for me to start the show. So we're going to see what happens with I just limit my palette to these 4 colors. And I'll talk a little bit about habit and painting. And there might actually be a little bit of blue that works its way into the painting just because I've got some blue mixed in on my palette. I've covered up all the other greens and purples and blues, but my palette's a little bit messy. And it may be a lead in to talk about how do I talk about habits when painting and the power of maybe shifting a habit. I'm going to start off with a little personal story, a father and son story that I'm sure many people can probably relate to, and it's a story where the father, in his loving way, teaches the child, teaches the son his strengths. And the son, not knowing any different, because the father is his whole world pretty much at a young age. So my personal experience was a moment when my dad said to me, you know, your problem, Tony, is you don't form any habits. And I didn't really know exactly what he meant by that. I mean, if you ask Mary Ann, you'll find out that I have plenty of habits that might not be the greatest thing. But I think he was mostly talking about, you know, he has a real strength in developing habits, and I would actually call it more of an ability to commit to something and be consistent with it. And when we were children, he started smoking when he was in the Navy. This is before he got married. And when he had children, he said to himself, I'm not going to smoke. And he just quit. Changed just like that. I don't think he needed any patch or any help. He just made the decision and quit, which is the strength that he has, and he can commit to something and do it day in and day out for the rest of his life and be pretty consistent with it. Well, I'm kind of wired a little bit differently, where I probably do things different all the time. Even something I'm doing consistently and regularly like this. I think last Friday I opened the show by saying this is painting live instead of painting spirit. It's just the way my mind is wired. And I used to think of it as a weakness until one day when I had already moved out of... Let's bring in some darker reds here and really see what we can do to... I'm still painting in this similar way. I was kind of hoping to do a landscape and really challenge myself, but maybe that's too much of a challenge at this point. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. Maybe even stick to this limited palette and see what happens. Anyway, so I'd moved out and let's get rid of some of this thickness of the paint. Been away for quite some time. Right now I'm wiping my brush off on a rag. Taking a dry brush and wiping it off. It's kind of giving me a different feel to this painting. Well, my dad was going on vacation and he needed me to mow the lawn. And over the years, his the backyard had slowly changed with landscaping, a new gazebo that was built. Let's do something with white here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but let's just really get some big white there. Slow my brush work down just a little bit. Get rid of that little clump. And I might play with that. So he asked me to do his mowing for him while they were gone on vacation. And I hadn't mowed there in a while, and I just noticed that the backyard was kind of more of a triangular shape now than a rectangle. And so I just mowed kind of at a diagonal to the house. When my dad got back, he's like, oh my gosh, I'd never even thought of that. Because he had been mowing it the same way for years and years and years. And basically parallel to the house. And so that was a nice moment for me to realize that, what one person's strengths are might be a weakness for another person, but that weakness can also be a strength. And so it's nice to every now and then when you're working in your art to kind of shake things up a little bit, get rid of your typical way of doing something and see what it opens up for you. I want to see how that black mixes with the yellow to create kind of a green. Now I don't have any green in there, but because I'm using all these reds, earthy colors, that black and yellow really look like green. Even when I take it over, especially when I take it over onto this red here. What really happens, oh, see, even that up there kind of looks like a blue. And that's the white mixing with the black. Makes kind of a gray, but that gray with all this, well, I kind of got rid of that bluish thing there, trying to force it. Anyway, it got too much into my head. There was a little bit of a blue. That kind of looks more like a blue there. Let's see here. What do I want to do? Anyway, what happens when you create a situation where you're forced to adapt and change your habits? Basically, what it's doing is getting you into the present moment. And it's always a good thing when creating art. You want to have that presence. This time, because I've switched to my colors, kind of playing with texture a little more, or just continue to play with this black and see what happens. You know, this talking was a big thing too, for me to talk while painting. So, you know, this whole habit thing also has to do with beliefs about yourself, and it's conditioning. And a lot of times we get conditioned to believing about ourselves a certain way, and it limits us, which I had a definite belief that, you know, I'm not going to be able to tell us, look, see, we got some purple there. So even though I have no purple on my palette right now, I just created purple. Mixing that white with the black next to the yellow. And you might not see it very well on the camera. Anyway, back to beliefs. I had a belief that, you know, I'm not somebody who's going to be able to talk while painting. It's just not my thing. There are many people that can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. I'm not one of those people. Well, if I had listened to that belief, I wouldn't be doing these, would I? And it's not so bad. Seems like it's working out. So, see what you can do with changing something up for yourself that you think is true for you, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it was just something you were conditioned to believe and isn't necessarily true. So go ahead and get your brushes out and see what you can change for yourself. And tomorrow maybe I will bring in a landscape with these colors and see what happens. And see you tomorrow.